Over the years, we've watched Sears quickly fade from the retail landscape. It's almost hard to believe now that they once dominated it. Beyond the memories and merchandise, Sears left behind a surprisingly rich architectural legacy that shaped our cities, influencing everything from the design of the suburbs to skyscrapers. Hey everyone, I'm Steve, and this is how Sears changed architecture. It began with a box of watches back in 1886. Richard Sears was working on the railroad at the time and discovered the box and purchased it, selling the 500 watches to fellow railroaders for a nice profit. Soon he was joined by watchmaker Alva Roebuck, selling watches and jewelry through the mail, later expanding in 1893 to a general mail-order business as the Sears Roebuck and Company. A few years later, they were joined by Julius Rosenwald, who helped transform the growing but unorganized business into an efficient one. Their appeal to Americans made them one of the fastest-growing mail-order businesses in the country. Inside the pages of the catalog was everything needed for the average family, from musical instruments to sewing machines. But their largest and most influential product was their famous catalog homes. It was a solution to a problem plaguing Sears's warehouses filled with surplus building materials. To unload the excess stock, Sears enlisted a board of 6 architects to design 44 easy-to-build houses that would be, quote, a credit to your neighborhood. Customers purchasing a house early in the program's run received everything needed for the house. Well, almost everything. Customers received a set of house plans, millwork, hardware, and mechanical systems. Not included was the lumber for framing. But Sears was happy to sell it to people separately through their catalog. Over the years, Sears's team of in-house and outside architects designed a total of 447 designs in a wide variety of styles. Some were popular styles of the era, like Queen Anne or Dutch Colonial. Some were a bit more experimental, like these designed by Prairie School architect John Van Bergen. He designed 2 Prairie School houses for the catalog in 1918, the Aurora and the Carlton, with the Carlton being the most expensive house in the history of the program at over $5,100. Unfortunately, the 2 designs weren't very popular, with only one of each design being purchased, and they were discontinued the following year. More successfully, Sears helped introduce the rest of America to California's Mission Revival with the Alhambra, and helped popularize, along with other kit home companies, the arts and crafts bungalow. Now it's worth mentioning Sears didn't invent the catalog home. That distinction goes to the Radford Architectural Company. But because of their prominence in the marketplace and their high-quality materials, they elevated what a catalog home could be. Most catalog homes of the era were standard, vernacular structures, like 4 squares or saltbox houses. Sears's wide variety of styles attracted a wider customer base, selling somewhere between 70,000 and 100,000 units over the course of the program. Early sales numbers were promising for the company, expanding the program by purchasing 3 lumber mills across the country between 1909 and 1912, and offering lumber with the purchase of their kits. But it wouldn't be until 1918 that they introduced pre-cut lumber, and the idea of owning their own home was a big draw to many Americans, with Sears and other kit home companies providing a path toward that goal, paving the way for the suburbs. According to Sears, a customer was able to assemble their home in less than 90 days. This didn't always happen. With record sales, the 1920s was a period of expansion for the company. This was demonstrated in the construction of vast catalog distribution centers in major cities throughout the country, kind of like the Amazon fulfillment centers of their day. But Sears didn't just design basic warehouse buildings. These were grand monuments to Sears's dominance. They were designed by Sears's chief architect George Nimmons, an architect who got his start working for the legendary Chicago firm Burnham and Root. Each warehouse was unique, but they all featured the same basic massing, with a central tower to mark the entrance and hide a cistern for rainwater. These towers were based on the company's 1904 headquarters, also designed by Nimmons, which was itself inspired by classic Italian campanelles. Many were designed in the then-emerging style of Art Deco. By designing in the opulent and modern style, Sears was creating, as architectural historian Richard Longstreth put it, quote, proud beacons of modernity. With these buildings, Sears was not just the retailer of the present, but of the future as well. This expansion culminated in the form of their biggest impact on the American architectural landscape, and that's the creation of the Suburban department store. The first Sears retail locations were found at the base of their catalog warehouses, but by the mid-1920s, they expanded into more traditional, standalone retail locations. This came about because of General Robert Wood, a former executive at Sears' biggest competitor, Montgomery Ward, left the company after being rejected for suggesting such an idea. He joined Sears and was welcomed with his new idea, but instead of a grand urban department store in line with Chicago's Marshall Fields, Wood envisioned a store in the growing suburbs, at the crossroads of two country roads where land was plentiful, cheap, and easily accessible by car. George Nimmons was once again called upon to design these new retail stores, many of which were designed in the Art Deco style, further popularizing the style across the country. Take, for instance, the Miami store, with its gleaming white exterior and tall tower, or the Inglewood store, branded as the most modern department store with its windowless facade and climate-controlled interior. These from-the-ground-up stores were built well into the 1930s, crafting the public image of modernity and stability, especially in the thick of the Great Depression. These buildings were part of Sears' branding and were designed for the car, with entrances in the back near the parking lot and signage that was visible from the roadway. These became the standards for suburban stores for decades to come. During the expansion into retail stores, the company quietly closed the Modern Home division in 1940. But this wasn't the end of Sears in the home construction business. Following a housing shortage in the post-war years, Sears embarked on an experimental program that aimed to bring prefabrication to the masses. These homes were called Home Art homes, and were small ones, at 600 to 800 square feet, and were less diverse in their architectural styling than their modern home predecessors. These houses were made up of standard wall units that were built in mass in a factory. They were then trucked to a site and assembled. The base price included the structure, but nothing else. Plumbing and electrical were considered extras and sold separately. Mostly due to their limited styles and sizes, the Home Art homes weren't very popular, leading to the division being shuttered in 1951. In the 1950s, Sears was ahead of the competition in the number of suburban retail stores, and they continued to expand and revamp them. One of the architects responsible for this was Carl Schneider. Prior to immigrating to America, Schneider was an accomplished architect in Germany, working briefly with Walter Gropius, designing in the international style. His personal style was defined by simple geometric forms accented with horizontal lines and overhangs. When he arrived in America, he got a job at Sears designing appliances and toys. In 1943, Schneider moved to the store planning and display department. He carried over his design language to Sears, creating stores that were elegantly modern, like this one that featured a rooftop terrace for shoppers. Beyond these designs, Schneider also created a series of store concepts. These included prefabricated architectural facades that could be easily affixed to a standard building. This meant building a store was easier to design, and created a unified architectural brand that could be easily identifiable for people driving through town. Schneider and Sears also revolutionized the interiors of stores, replacing the individual departments with open, free-flowing floor plans. For better or worse, this was the beginning of the big box retail store design we still see today. Beyond Schneider's contribution, another important architect helped define Sears' post-war architecture, that being Charles Luckman. Luckman, following his time with William Pereira, helped design several of Sears' standalone stores in the 1950s and 60s. These stores were sprawling, taking advantage of their large sites. They featured open interiors and a mixture of materials. These stores were in sharp contrast to many other suburban stores were sandwiched inside tiny strip malls. The late 1950s, thanks to Victor Gruen's Southdale Center, sparked the beginning of the shopping mall craze. Retailers around the country were lining up to lease space within these new malls. Sears, seeing how the Dayton department store helped fund Southdale Center, decided to cut out the middleman and develop their own shopping malls beginning in 1959 under the Home Art Development Company. Naturally, they would feature the latest Sears stores. Seminary South Shopping Center in Texas would be the first Sears mall to open in 1962. These malls ranged in size and style over the years. There was the subtle nod to classic European arcades at the Inland Center Mall in San Bernardino. Phoenix's more sculptural Metro Center Mall. There was the elegant mall anchoring a vast mixed-use complex in Tyson. Most of these malls were positioned near major roadways and highways. As with many other malls of the era, Sears's malls became fixtures of these suburban neighborhoods and made the Homart Development Company one of the largest mall developers in the country. Of course, a discussion about Sears's architectural legacy isn't complete without a mention of the Sears Tower. Now, we've talked about the Sears Tower in greater detail on this channel before, but here are some of the basics. It was designed in the late 1960s and completed in 1973, replacing the company's original 1904 headquarters. The Sears Tower was designed by SOM's Bruce Graham and Dr. Fazlur Khan. Using the innovative bundle tube construction method, the Sears Tower was able to become the tallest building in the world. Sears executives had plenty of input into the creation of the tower, mainly on how much space they would need. By calculating the current number of employees and their rate of growth over time, Sears determined how much square footage they would need, which SOM was able to morph into a visually dominating structure. It's become a lasting icon of Chicago, and would be one of the last great skyscrapers of the modernist era before the rise of postmodernism. The Sears Tower was intended to become a symbol of Sears's seemingly unending dominance over its competitors. But to paraphrase John Steinbeck, Sears would, quote, now face the danger, which in the past has been most destructive to humans: success. The Sears Tower would soon be where Sears executives watched the cracks of their empire form. The most visible sign of this slow decline was in their stores. The stores of the 70s, 80s, and 90s showed Sears's comfort in the marketplace. Many of the older stores were replaced with newer ones that didn't seem to capture the vitality of the ones of yesteryear. Even Sears executives appeared to recognize this way back in 1978, when they wrote in a corporate report, quote, "We're not an exciting store." By the 1990s, Walmart had dethroned Sears as the world's largest retailer. In 1992, Sears began moving out of its namesake tower, and by 1995, the tower was sold, but the name remained until 2009, when it was given the new name of the Willis Tower. Also in the 90s, Sears began closing and selling off their vast portfolio of catalog warehouses, leaving many abandoned. Through years of poor management decisions, 2010 marked the final year of profitability for the company. The next 8 years would see store closures as common occurrences. Most of the shuttered stores would find new tenants, but many, mainly the older ones, and ones left inside dead malls, would be left abandoned, rotting away. In 2018, the company filed for bankruptcy, emerging a few months later a shell of its former self, with only 11 stores still open, and those haven't been updated in at least a decade. And so that brings us to today, and what seems like the end of the story. But even with much of their company gone, Sears's architecture continues to reshape the built environment. Remember those old catalog warehouses? Well, when they were sold off in the 90s, some were torn down, but those that remained saw a second life with different uses. In Seattle, the Sears building became the headquarters of Starbucks, and many of those that remained were transformed into a mixture of retail, dining, office, and residential. Take, for instance, the Sears building in Boston that was transformed into 401 Park, which anchors a massive redevelopment of the Fenway neighborhood of the city. The redevelopment honors the building's past with display cases filled with old Sears merchandise and catalogs. And the architects left much of the original structure intact. Similar stories of successful adaptive reuse have played out in Atlanta, Minneapolis, and Memphis. Fitting tribute to a company that, for better or worse, contributed to our built environment, helping popularize our residential styles and the way we shop, and that their architectural legacy continues to bring new life to their communities. It's kind of incredible what can come from a box of watches. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, consider subscribing to discover more interesting stories from the world of architecture. I'm Steve. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time with another edition of All Things Architecture, where every building has a story.